Okay, fine, I'll do some proper top 10s for a change. So, He Who Moans now presents as close to mainstream style YouTube content as I'll ever go. 4 top 10 lists of Doctor Who episodes. Please note, I may have talked about some of these episodes in the following few lists before, so sorry for any repetition that goes on for regular viewers. And if you haven't seen me talk about said episodes before, I'll link all the full videos at the relevant bits where I have them. Secondly, don't think you know for certain what's going to be on these lists, and don't take the order of them that seriously. I know that some people are a lot more hardcore in their list making than I am, and I've had a tendency to randomly throw out titles of best, worst, or just random rankings occasionally, but I'm a disorganised fuck who's rarely actually bothered to sit down and do this shit seriously, and as said, when it comes to the order, I know that people quibble over X being better than Y, but to be honest, I've never really considered the order of lists that important, so take the order that I put these in with a grain of salt. Just call it top 10 episodes I have X opinion on. So, my top 10 best episodes of Classic Who. Number 10. An Unearthly Child. This is entirely here on the basis of part 1. It's dragged down to number 10 on the basis of parts 2 through 4 because the opening episode of the first ever series is one of those rare bits of media where all the right elements just sort of fell into place to create this utterly beautiful bit of TV. There's just a gorgeous atmosphere about An Unearthly Child, and if you strip away all of the context of Doctor Who that you have now, just try and watch it in the mindset of this is 1963, this is a new show that you're tuning into for the first time, it's just such a tight and well-plotted 25-minute mystery, baiting you further into Ian and Barbara investigating the background of this mysterious young girl who appears to have knowledge of future events. The following 3 episodes aren't what I'd call terrible by any means, but they couldn't really live up to the solid gold classic that part 1 was. But yeah, if I were doing just single episodes, I'd probably have to put this at number 1. It's utterly superb from start to finish, and if you want to call yourself a Doctor Who fan with a straight face, you need to have seen this one. Number 9. The Ambassadors of Death. This one's a personal favourite, and while I'll admit it really hasn't aged that well, but I like this one for its grandiose attempt to portray how mankind might actually respond to the arrival of a benevolent alien race. So much sci-fi and what Doctor Who had done up until that point had a tendency to typically paint aliens as invariably the bad guys bent on destruction, and here we've got mankind assuming that that's the intent when it's actually not, and coming across like a bunch of self-important children. And as I've made clear in the past, what with depressing self-loathing narratives that hate their own characters generally getting tongue baths from moody fucks like myself, while it's not that subtle, I like Ambassadors for just how confrontational it is. I guess I'm in the minority on this, and the ending's a bit of an anticlimax, but I really like the way this one subverts standard sci-fi formulas. There's a fair few holes in it that I could poke if I were going deeper, but with some gold cliffhangers and a conspiracy that I was highly engaged in, I dunno, I just really like this one. Number 8. The Web of Fear. Any commuters out there will probably despise the London Underground like I do. It's a fucking horrible place, particularly when you get stuck in a tunnel at a red signal and you look out of the window and you see just nothing but this black, empty void. And that's what Web of Fear plays on, and it does an excellent job of it, taking something ordinary and familiar to the viewer and expanding on a creepy aspect of it so it puts the shits up you. It's maybe ever so slightly longer than it should be, but the way it uses its environment in tandem with the mysterious Yeti and the Great Intelligence, it just has this wonderfully immersive effect on the viewer. The familiar settings, the dark and foreboding atmosphere, and some awesome direction from Douglas Camfield in particular. The mark of a good director is being able to make something made cheap look like it's had a ton of money chucked at it. And Web of Fear just looks absolutely gorgeous. Number 7. Survival. Season 26 is my pick for the best, most consistent season of Old Who. Ace's character arc throughout the series had been so interesting to watch as her relationship with the Doctor became so much more complicated. And for those of us who've been following Ace's serials in chronological order, you'd seen her progress from the unreliable, destructive teenager to a strong, independent grown-up capable of surviving on her own. And for that reason, she acts as a great audience avatar in Survival, and in my opinion, it's one of Sophie Aldred's best performances. The plot's really dark and nasty as well, and it serves as a great send-off for the series. In spite of the fact that not many people were sure if this was going to be the end of the series at this point, there's this feeling of finality in the air throughout the whole thing. It's all about ill-equipped but ultimately good-natured people thrown into a savage, uncaring world on the brink of destruction. And that ending monologue just kills me every time, and it's incredible to think it was a last-minute addition too. Well, yes, it does suck that nothing came after this. It was a dignified and noble send-off for the old show, and it's one of the classic serials that I've watched the most. Number 6. The Mind Robber. Thank Christ the Mind Robber wasn't a victim of the junking period, because this would never work without the visuals. While people did complain at the time that the story where the Doctor and co wind up in a land of fiction and fairy tales, basically an incredibly eerie 1960s version of Imagination Land from South Park, was more a piece of children's fantasy than it was sci-fi, I personally just love the Mind Robber's abstract and rough around the edges feel to it. Its boundless creativity makes it so unpredictable. It's got this sense of foreboding about it. You're not quite sure what bizarre monsters are going to lurk around the next corner. But at the same time, it can also be downright hilarious. One of the key cast members wants a week off? Okay then, his character gets shot and then turned into a cardboard cutout with no face for some reason, and the Doctor has to put his face back together, but he gets it wrong, so said key cast member can be replaced with a stand-in for this week only. Like, seriously, don't you just love that? I really think Doctor Who needs more stories where it just takes a look at concepts like reality and logic and just says, you know what, I really can't be arsed with you this week. Let's get some robots to crush the companions to death in a massive book. That makes total sense. Yes, it does. Shut up, reality, you boring twat. Number 5. The Daleks' Master Plan. While the Daleks' Master Plan isn't without its flaws not including the fact that only 3 episodes survived the junking period, and the fact that they did is a fucking miracle, and the chances of finding any more are pretty much nil, I'm also not that fond of the random Christmas special that happens in the middle. The story as a whole is a tad meandering in parts, and episodes 5 and 10, 2 of the ones that we actually have the full visuals for, are easily 2 of the weaker entries in this serial, but I really admire Dalek Master Plan for just its vision and guts. Famously, the only other country that aired all of the 60s serials bar this one, Australia, decided not to air Master Plan because they deemed it to be unsuitable for the audience at the time slot. And they really weren't kidding. It's easily one of the most provocative things that you could have put out in this time slot and during the political climate of the time. If you're up on your Cold War history, you'll know just how bleak world events were looking in 1965. And lots of popular media was using dissatisfaction with global affairs as inspiration, to offer their take on the depressing state the world was in. But for the BBC to do that on this platform in a sci-fi show principally marketed at children, not a whole lot of stuff made these days comes anywhere near close to that provocative. And Dalek Master Plan was a great evolution of the Daleks' initial purpose of being a spin on the Nazis in 1963 when World War II was fresh in everyone's minds, to 1965, at a time when the fear of a nuclear holocaust was very pervasive throughout society. In Master Plan, we have the Daleks forming an alliance with many aliens and a corrupt guardian of Earth to create a superweapon using a rare element. And it just doesn't pull any punches in going, yep, you're right, that is what we're talking about. It doesn't coddle its audience. It's one of the more sophisticated and provocative serials in Classic Who, and as said, while it's a bit meandering, I find it impressive it actually made it to air at all, let alone whether or not we'll actually get to see it again, which we probably won't. The soundtrack's still a must-listen though. Number 4. Remembrance of the Daleks. Have you ever wondered what 1960s suburban Britain would look like if it was turned into a war zone between rival variants of genocidal space Nazis? Well, fortunately you got this. The production on Remembrance is just incredible. So many explosions everywhere. And this one uses a lot more practical effects for those explosions as well, which somehow just feel that much more satisfying than explosions forged in CG. And it's also another stellar performance from Sophie Aldred as well, whose attack on a Dalek with a baseball bat is one of the most memorable bits of Old Who. It's just this really intense and engaging experience with a lot of action sequences that just flow from one to the next really nicely, wasting no time, and just making you feel that sense of danger they're trying to give to the familiar environment. Number 3. Genesis of the Daleks. If you've ever seen any Classic Who at all, chances are it's this one. While a lot of the symbolism is a bit heavy-handed, gee, I wonder if this is supposed to be like a Nazi war bunker, but in space. Genesis of the Daleks' success is all in its attention to detail, in crafting an alien world and fleshing out the backstory of the Khaleds and the Thals, and the factors that led up to the creation of the Daleks. Its plot twists and revelations aren't based on how we've absorbed the Daleks in the real world. The scenes like that first Dalek test, the chamber where the Dalek mutants are grown, and just lots of the backstory of Skaro are written in a very organic way that doesn't let the Daleks' popularity outside the context of the show get in the way of telling a compelling story and making this Skaro feel real. While it has its silliness to it, it's one of the most seen bits of Old Who for a very good reason. Number 2. The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. This one is quite possibly the most underrated story in the whole of Doctor Who. It's given nowhere near the kudos it deserves. The shit being flung at Doctor Who thick and fast after every episode was a humbling experience for it, and Greatest Show is a great demonstration of the show reflecting on its place in culture at 25 years old. The story of the Doctor and Ace visiting a space circus with a declining reputation is self-aware, and it shows a hefty degree of introspection and, above all, humility, which is rare for such a big-name franchise, especially in an anniversary year. That one lone fan they still have left, finding the show that they love is not what it once was, and has been corrupted by sinister goings-on behind the scenes. Greatest Show in the Galaxy knows that Doctor Who is petering on the brink of collapse, and comments on its depressing situation by crafting a beautifully imaginative and bleak environment, but with enough tongue-in-cheek humour and honest-to-God dignity to keep the mood afloat. I think it's by and large the bravest story in Doctor Who history, and it just kept hitting me with one bold idea after another. While it can be very cheesy and 80s at times, if you haven't already got this one, get it. And number 1. Yeah, there's no tension, because most of my regular viewers probably know what it is already. Fury from the Deep. I could just listen to this soundtrack forever, I really could. I've done a video about why I think Fury from the Deep is so awesome that you can watch here, and it'll always be my favourite. Its script is gorgeous, its performances are fantastic, the music is some of the best I've heard in a TV show. And from the surviving telesnaps, it looks like it would have looked absolutely fucking incredible, and just... please, missing episode hunters out there, please find this one. So, do you agree with my list? Do you disagree with my list? Does it matter whether you agree with my list or not? What will the consequences of your opinion on my list be? Will there be any consequences? Why not discuss these questions in the comments? Or don't, it doesn't matter really.